All right, let's dive straight in. Today we're tackling epistaxis, nosebleeds, common, but can be tricky. And we're going to do it exam style, put you in the hot seat, just like a medical student facing a consultant.
Sounds good.
Our patient is a 55-year-old office manager in A&E with profuse epistaxis, history of atrial fibrillation on warfarin, hypertension, and congestive cardiac failure as well. Right now, he's actively bleeding from the right nostril. So what are your first steps?
Well, you always start with the ABCDEs, don't you? Airway, breathing, circulation, disability, and exposure. Got to make sure he's stable before we even think about anything else.
Right. So assuming our patient is stable for now, what's next?
History. Absolutely crucial. I need to know everything about this bleed. How long has it been going on? Has this happened before? Any trauma? Can't forget about his medications either, that warfarin especially.
Why is the history of previous nosebleeds so important?
Well, if he's a frequent flyer, so to speak, it could point to something local. Fragile blood vessel, maybe. Little's area, Kieselbach's plexus, classic spot for these.
Makes sense. And the warfarin. Why are we so focused on that?
Anticoagulant. Thins the blood, stops it clotting as quickly. That can make even a small bleed a real problem.
All right, so we've got the history. What about examination? What are we looking for?
Need to examine the nose, of course. Find that source of the bleeding. Also, look for any signs of bleeding elsewhere. Bruising, petechiae, that sort of thing.
Right. So history, examination, done. Investigations. What would you order?
Given the warfarin, INR is top of the list. International Normalized Ratio. Tells us how long it takes his blood to clot. Full blood count as well. Hemoglobin, platelets, get the whole picture.
Okay. Let's say that INR comes back high. Say 4.5.
Well, that would confirm our suspicions about the warfarin, wouldn't it? Normal INR is around 4.5. That's significantly elevated.
So how do we manage this patient while we're waiting for those results?
Control that bleeding. First things first. Sit him up, head forward, stops the blood trickling down the throat. Then direct pressure, cartilaginous part of the nose, good 10 minutes at least.
Would you pack the nose at this stage?
If it doesn't stop, yes. We'd use something like bismuth iodoform paraffin paste. Helps stop the bleeding, encourages clotting.
What about cauterization?
Can be useful for smaller bleeds, single point. Profuse bleeding like this, elevated INR, not likely to be much help.
All right. Bleeding's under control for now. What about stabilizing the patient? What are our concerns here?
This much blood loss, got to think about hypovolemic shock. Monitoring heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate. Estimate the blood loss, might need fluid resuscitation.
And what sort of fluids are we talking?
Crystalloids, saline solution, or colloids. Larger molecules pull fluid back into the bloodstream.
Right, so we've stabilized him, bleeding's under control, investigations are off. Now that INR comes back, 4.5, what next?
Got to reverse the warfarin, vitamin K oral or IV. Fresh frozen plasma, prothrombin complex concentrate, recombinant factor, VEA. Depends how severe the bleed is. Hematology will have a say, too.
A lot of options there. How do you choose?
Yeah, that's where it gets interesting. It all depends. The whole clinical picture, how bad the bleed is. Each treatment, it has its own risks and benefits.
Well, let's unpack those nuances in part 2 of our deep dive into epistaxis.
Certainly.
So we've got our patient, profuse epistaxis. That INR is sky high, 4.5. You mentioned reversing the warfarin. Let's go through those options. Vitamin K, fresh frozen plasma, prothrombin complex concentrate, recombinant factor, VI. Break those down for us.
All right. So vitamin K, that's essential for making clotting factors produced in the liver. Giving vitamin K, we're basically topping those up, helping the blood clot properly again. Can give it orally or IV. Depends how urgently we need it to work.
And what about fresh frozen plasma?
FFP contains all the clotting factors you'd find in normal blood. Fast way to reverse the warfarin, but it's nonspecific. And we need to thaw it, cross-match it, takes a bit of time.
You also mentioned prothrombin complex concentrate. What is that?
PCC. It's a more concentrated dose of clotting factors. Works quickly, no need for blood group matching, so it's good for emergencies. Slight risk of thrombosis, though. Got to keep that in mind.
And lastly, recombinant factor VEA. What's special about that one?
Genetically engineered clotting factor. Powerful stuff, really good for severe bleeding. Most expensive option, though, and highest risk of thrombosis. We tend to save it for life-threatening situations when nothing else is working.
So choosing the right reversal agent, it's a real balancing act then. Severity of the bleed, how quickly we need it to work, the risks involved with each one.
Exactly. We always talk it through with the patient, explain the risks and benefits, and get hematology involved, too.
Okay. Let's say the bleeding is under control, INR is sorted. Are we done?
Not quite. We need to think about next steps. Admission, for one.
Admission. Why is that necessary for a nosebleed?
Anyone with nasal packing needs close monitoring. Packing could slip, obstruct the airway. We need to watch for complications. Infection, toxic shock syndrome. Can't be too careful.
Aside from monitoring the packing, what else needs to be done?
Find out what caused this. Remember, our patient has hypertension, congestive heart failure. Both of those can lead to nosebleeds.
So would you get other specialties involved at this stage?
Absolutely. ENT need them to assess his nasal passages thoroughly. They might suggest a rhinoscopy, nasendoscopy, get a good look at the bleeding point, see if they need to do anything else.
Let's talk about those procedures. Rhinoscopy, nasendoscopy, what are they exactly?
Rhinoscopy is simple. Use a speculum, have a look inside the nose. Nasendoscopy, that's a bit fancier. Thin, flexible tube, camera on the end, lets them see the whole nasal cavity, sinuses, everything.
And what can ENT do if they find the source?
Depends, really. Where is it? How bad is it? They can cauterize the blood vessel, heat or chemicals, apply pressure, special sponge or a balloon. Sometimes they even do surgical ligation, tie off the bleeding vessel.
Right. So we've dealt with immediate bleeding, reversed the warfarin, he's been admitted, other specialties are involved. What about long-term management?
Long term, we need to tackle those underlying conditions. Atrial fibrillation, hypertension, congestive heart failure, all need attention.
Let's start with the atrial fibrillation. What does that mean for his anticoagulation?
Well, it puts him at risk of stroke, so anticoagulation is vital. But we need to find that sweet spot, preventing stroke without increasing his bleeding risk too much. Might adjust his warfarin dose, could even think about switching to a different anticoagulant, or explore other ways to prevent stroke altogether.
And how about the hypertension?
Blood pressure control, absolutely crucial. Lifestyle changes, diet, exercise, medications if we need them.
Lastly, the congestive heart failure. How do we approach that?
Heart failure often needs a whole team. Cardiologists, nurses, everyone. Aim is to improve his heart function, reduce symptoms, improve his quality of life, adjust his medications, maybe consider a pacemaker, other devices. Sometimes we even look at things like heart transplantation.
Sounds like a lot to consider even after that initial emergency is over.
It is. Epistaxis, it can seem straightforward, but it can be a sign of something more serious. Needs careful thought, long-term management.
Great point. Well, that brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive into epistaxis. In part 3, we'll be discussing the specific challenges of managing patients on anticoagulants, like warfarin. So we've talked about assessment, management, even the long-term stuff. But for patients with underlying conditions, it can get pretty complicated, like with our patient, on warfarin for atrial fibrillation. That really adds another layer to the whole case, doesn't it?
It does. Anticoagulation, essential for preventing stroke in AF. But of course, it also increases the risk of bleeding. It's a tough balance.
How do you weigh those risks and benefits when you're managing a patient like this?
Well, you have to consider everything. The individual patient's stroke risk, any history of bleeding, their lifestyle, what they want.
What kind of things increase stroke risk?
Oh, lots of things. Age, hypertension, diabetes, heart failure, previous strokes, TIAs.
And how do you assess their bleeding risk?
Well, look at their past medical history. Any bleeding episodes before? Their medications, things like alcohol consumption, liver function, all play a part.
So let's say our patient needs to stay on anticoagulation long term. What are the alternatives to warfarin?
We've got the DOACs now, direct oral anticoagulants, don't need regular blood monitoring like warfarin, and they seem to be just as good at preventing stroke.
What's the advantage of using a DOAC?
Much more convenient for patients, no constant INR checks. Some studies suggest they might even be safer, lower risk of major bleeding.
Any downsides?
They can be a bit pricier than warfarin. And reversing them, if there's a big bleed, that can be more tricky, fewer options available.
Right, so warfarin versus DOAC, it's a big decision. Really depends on the individual patient.
Absolutely. Talk to the patient, explain everything clearly, the risks, the benefits, they need to be part of that decision.
This whole deep dive, it's really shown how complex epistaxis can be. Seems simple on the surface, but there's so much to consider.
Exactly. Systematic approach, understand those underlying conditions, talk to the patient. That's the key to good management.
Any final words of wisdom for our aspiring surgeons out there?
Don't cut corners on history and examination. That's number one. Always think about the patient's medications, could be interactions. And remember, fixing the immediate problem, that's just the start. Long-term care, managing those underlying conditions, supporting the patient, that's what makes a real difference.
Excellent advice. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into epistaxis. Hope you found it useful. Until next time.